The most important political news today in this country was the news that was virtually ignored. Unemployment fell to just 4%. That's the lowest in 13 years. Now, this is not just, good for the economy, people paying taxes and all that kind of thing. It's actually good culturally, morally, for Australians to be in work, to be busy, to feel more in control of their future, to feel that they're supporting themselves, not just sitting on a couch waiting for the dole. And to have so many people here, so many Australians in work, is actually better than what we were doing before, importing hundreds of thousands more immigrants every year to effectively keep wages down. Now, that crazy policy, that filled our cities to bursting and kept many Australians out of work. So this is a very important moment, a moment to learn something and not repeat that mistake as the politicians are now threatening to do. Oh, we've got to bring in lots more people. We've got to double immigration, we're even told. But the media today was often another blame ScoMo hunt. How come Scott Morrison waited a week before giving some flooded parts of northern New South Wales the same flood relief that he gave to the very worst hit, Lismore? Lismore people, he said, a week or two ago, could get 3 disaster payments, not 1. Well, Australia Today, you cannot give a handout to one person these days without another 10 people saying, where's mine? And this time Morrison wasn't just smashed by Labor, but by one of his own. New South Wales Liberal MP, Catherine Cusack, said she was so outraged she's now got to quit the New South Wales Parliament. I've got to say, honestly, there's something not quite logical about a politician quitting politics to give their voters a better deal. How does that go? But if that is the way things work now, I actually have a list of 20 or 30 politicians who could also quit Parliament and leave us all better off as well. Joining me is Sky News political editor, Andrew Clennell. Andrew Clennell, thank you for joining me. The Prime Minister in trouble again about, his alleged slow response to a natural disaster, this time holding out on flood relief for some parts of the country. How much truth is there to this?
Well, he's held out, but he's held out for a week, hasn't he? So it could be worse. And the announcement today is that those people in those surrounding areas, not just Lismore, will get the assistance. There's all sorts of other assistance announced by the New South Wales Government, including grants of $10,000 and so forth to help move back into your home. So, look, it's just a hiccup as opposed to a big concern. But I think you raise a valid point that he's often late to the party on this stuff. Now, they're kind of blaming the bureaucrats, saying the other areas didn't qualify like Lismore. But where does political sense come into it, Andrew? Rather than technical definitions by bureaucrats. If you've lost your home, you've lost your home. And so I think it was a bit of a mistake. And then there was a story in the Sunday Telegraph, which many believe came from the federal government, saying New South Wales initially refused defence requests, the New South Wales Government, before the Lismore floods. And then we had a leak last night, the fact that Scott Morrison supposedly was waiting till he returned from Perth to announce this. Well, it's been rushed forward today. So again, the New South Wales and federal government at odds a bit, even though they're of the same colour of politics. We've seen this often in natural disasters. Used to see it with Gladys Berejiklian, now Dominic Perrottet. It's very messy for those who are actually affected by the floods, who just want governments to get on with it. And I'm afraid that in covering Scott Morrison, it is a bit of a theme that he just comes late to decisions which are bleeding obvious. And I wonder too whether he'll change tack again on some of the cost of living stuff after Stephen Marshall gets walloped in the South Australian election on the weekend. Well, I can already tell him what's going to happen in the South Australian election. I can already tell him cost of living's an issue. So you'd have to hope he's working on that in terms of the budget.
Well, you mentioned he was in WA. Andrew, this scene melted my heart. It just showed me that forgiveness, grace in politics, it's still there. You had the Prime Minister in Perth doing a joint press conference with a man who's been at war with for 2 years, the Premier over there, who's been attacking him as well. It was just, it was just such a sweet moment. Explain it to us.
Well, he comes and announces some joint funding for little infrastructure projects with the WA Premier under a so-called city deal. But I'm glad he raised this because, again, it's something worth highlighting. I think he's making another error here, Scott Morrison. He's asked repeatedly in Perth, what about your disagreements with Mark McGowan about when to open the border? He goes, I always agreed with Mark McGowan. Well, it's not true, is it? So don't say it. I think Scott Morrison makes this mistake of trying to pretend things didn't happen. I think he'd get a lot more respect if he just said, you know what, I thought he should have opened earlier. He didn't open earlier. Now you're a lot more vaccinated. It's worked out pretty well. It's actually worked out well in other parts of the country. So now let's get on with what we agree with. And just be honest. I just think it's really problematic because people don't buy it anyway, Andrew. And people in Western Australia, I spent, the formative years of my life there, they think the East is the enemy anyway. They're not going to buy that you didn't oppose the hard border when you quite clearly did. And so I just don't know why he's gone down that route. I don't know who was, he should just say, we didn't always agree, but look at what I've got to offer if you elect me again,
Look, there are things I like about Scott Morrison, but I have to say, I think it's a failing in politicians to want too desperately to be liked. And I think that's one of his issues. Probably more so than, he's dishonest. I think he's just trying too hard to be liked. But good news for him today, unambiguously good news. Unemployment has fallen even lower than people were predicting. It's now 4%, just 4%. The Prime Minister today pointed out how unusual this was.
There are around 325,000 more jobs now than there were before the pandemic. The unemployment rate at 4% is the lowest rate that we've seen in almost 50 years. I was 5 years old when we last had an unemployment rate this low.
Andrew, this is not just, good news economically, good news for the government. I think it's also moral good news to have so many people now in jobs. I would suspect too that the crime rate, for instance, will fall as well because people in work are, too busy to do bad stuff. I think this is all good news. But for some reason, the public isn't giving the government ticks for any of this.
It's a very unusual situation. Normally, in the old days when we were a lot younger, Andrew, governments lost elections when there was high unemployment, like in 1983 with Malcolm Fraser. So we don't have that. We've got inflation creeping up. We've got labour shortages. We've got issues with COVID, and in certain states like South Australia with the hospital system. As a result, these are things annoying people at the moment. The sort of inflation, cost of living issue. If you're a business not having enough employees because of COVID. And so Scott Morrison, plus a number of mistakes, I guess, has fallen behind. The rule of politics is he should be in front with a 4% unemployment rate. So he's wise to keep pushing, look at how well we've done in terms of unemployment, because the Reserve Bank governor said it wasn't just the borders were shut. You might think it's that. He said it was the fiscal stimulus that Scott Morrison and the states had put in. So absolutely, a government should always be congratulated for low unemployment. I think it's good news. I think we need to open the international borders more to get people who can work, because labour shortage, it goes too far the other way after a while, but generally the government should be congratulated for the unemployment rate.
Well, I think they should be hammering it, if not for no other reason than set a benchmark. When Labor comes in, well, live up to this unemployment rate, guys. They'll give them an opportunity to attack when Labor's in power, as they almost certainly will be. Andrew Clennell, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.